Hello and welcome back to Wyoming Watch from the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. I'm Noah Zahn, your state government reporter here. This week we're talking about the SNAP benefits, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which provides food purchasing assistance for low and no income citizens that serves around 41.7 million Americans. As the federal shutdown drags into its sixth week, there's still no answer for where SNAP funds will come from after federal support for the program stopped at the beginning of this month. Last Friday, Governor Mark Gordon announced the use of $10 million in emergency state funds to temporarily fund the program as the Trump administration continues to face pressure from lawsuits and Americans about how some people will put food on their table as we approach Thanksgiving in less than 3 weeks. This week, I spoke with Kelly Douglas of the Wyoming Department of Family Services, which oversees Wyoming's SNAP program, on what this means for Wyoming. Here's that conversation now. I'm here with Kelly with the DFS. Can you tell me a bit about who you are and what your role is with the state of Wyoming?
My name's Kelly Douglas. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Department of Family Services. So my role is to help get the communication out for the department.
Mm-hmm. And, we were just talking before we started recording, and you said you've had a reporter call you about every day over the past month. So you guys have been pretty busy. Has a lot of that been related to the SNAP benefits discussion?
We've been very busy fielding calls from the public and from anyone who wants to know about what's going on with both LEAP and with SNAP and with the federal funding and the federal shutdown.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me a bit of background about what's happened there and how your department is responding to that?
On October 15th, we paused the LEAP program. That is a heating assistance program for low-income individuals in the state. We were able to process applications. We processed about 1,100 applications for LEAP, and then we had to pause, and the reason is that we ran out of funding for the program. We are still taking applications for LEAP, and we have had more applications, and we're just waiting for the funding so that we can process those and get the heating help to anyone who needs it, who is eligible.
And previously, was LEAP federally funded?
It is a federally funded program.
Mm-hmm. And so are there any solutions that the DFS is looking at in the near future to try to, get some more funding to that, like there has been efforts with the SNAP program?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, that's all right. Switching over to the SNAP benefits, the governor announced last Friday $10 million in the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account, or the LSRA, to support the SNAP program. Can you tell me a bit about how the DFS is using that money and what that means for your department?
Yeah, so the governor announced the public welfare emergency and gave DFS the information and the funding we need to create the hunger relief program. We have stood up that program as fast as possible. He made the announcement on Friday, and we sent checks yesterday to participating food banks, and we have already signed the contract with the Food Bank of Wyoming so that they can distribute groceries for food banks. This program is to help fill the need for food in Wyoming. Not having food is a crisis, and we have families that didn't receive their SNAP benefits that they expected, and they need food now. So we are getting the funding out to food banks across the state, and the funding will go for groceries. The food banks can buy groceries either through the Food Bank of Wyoming if they have a contract to work with them, or through local grocery stores. And they will buy the groceries, and then they can give the groceries away for individuals who need it.
Mm-hmm. And so, a technicality of this funding is you're not allowed to upload it upload the funds to EBT cards, so that's why you're doing it this way, giving it to food banks and charitable organizations. Is there a process for determining which organizations are, included in this program? Are there qualifications they have to meet, or is it just any kind of food bank, really?
They have to be able to distribute food, and they have to be able to give the food to who asks. They don't have to necessarily change their hours, but they do have to be able to give the food to people who ask for it. And we do know some of our food banks that are participating have increased their hours, and they've increased their numbers of volunteers to be able to distribute food as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. And the state government has allocated up to $10 million for this. And what I have is in September, DFS spent $4.8 million in SNAP benefits. How long, so far, this is the longest federal government shutdown in the nation's history. Just a few days ago, it became the longest one. How long will these funds be able to support this, temporary program to continue SNAP in Wyoming?
The intention is to fill that gap left by SNAP, which is, it's about $1.4 million a week. And so that is the intention of the hunger relief program.
Mm-hmm. So are there other alternatives if those funds run out, or just kind of hoping federal funds come back before that $10 million is expired?
I think we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay, sure. Oh, in another aspect of the funds distributed from the state government announced on Friday, they're a little bit different than how SNAP has been distributed in the past, with some of the more, I guess, nutritional differences. Can you tell me a bit about that, and what that means for DFS now and going forward? How is that different?
The governor announced a waiver, and kind of what that is just to make sure that the money goes for healthy and nutritious food. And DFS is working on a plan for that, and we will submit our plan in January for the governor.
So it's up to DFS to draft their own determinations of what that more nutritious food means.
It'll take some information gathering to be able to make a plan for how that would work.
And is that just like
SNAP recipients?
Yeah, and is that just like internal research and working with people who use SNAP in Wyoming, or how does that process work? That's all right.
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
I apologize.
No, that's okay. And
we're still in the early stages.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I appreciate you guys, you coming over and talking about this. I'm sure you're very busy. But another thing I wanted to ask about was, related to the nutrition aspect of it, there's currently a bill draft that some members of the legislature are considering in this interim session that's also related to SNAP benefits and the nutrition of it. They're trying to remove things like soft drinks and candies from SNAP benefits, and it was recently also amended to remove things like even up to spices like salt and pepper or ketchup and mustard. Does that draft bill come into if that is signed into law in February or approved in February, and then when it's signed into law, does that have any consideration with this executive order that the governor signed on Friday?
We are ready to form a plan and respond to any questions and anything that's asked of us by our governor and our legislative body.
And I remember some of the discussions around that draft bill were that DFS would have to have something like a 2-year study to measure how the effectiveness of the health changes. I guess I'm not sure if I'm putting it correctly. Is there any kind of study that DFS has to do with the nutrition changes related to the executive order signed Friday?
We're still in the early stage. I'm afraid I don't have a good answer
Sure.
for you.
No, that's all right. And on nationally, are you guys watching what other states are doing at all? Is what's happening in Wyoming unique compared to other states, or is this happening elsewhere?
Nebraska had a similar waiver for the healthy food, and USDA did accept that waiver, and there's information about it on their website, and it's been working so far from what we've heard.
Mm-hmm. Have they had that signed longer, or is it all about the same since the funding expired at the beginning of the month?
Oh, they stood that up last year.
At
some time, I believe.
The waiver for the nutrition aspect of it. As far as the funding that's been cut off since the beginning of the month, how are other states reacting to that? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I think that some other states are funding food banks similar to what we are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess what have you been hearing from those food banks? You said you sent out the checks, I think yesterday, is that right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure it hasn't all rolled out yet, but what are you hearing from them? Is there, things they're needing more support with in distribution? I know in one of our earlier reports on us, a food bank told us they've had, their numbers have been up by over 200 families per day from one in Cheyenne. What is that going to look like at food banks in your vision?
I can't speak for the food banks themselves, but I can tell you that we have some good participation. We have 80 food banks that are participating in the hunger relief program right now, and we hope to add more.
Mm-hmm. And are there any parts of the state, Wyoming, there's lots of rural areas of Wyoming, and, in particular, people who were on or using SNAP benefits previously could go use them at grocery stores. Food banks may not be as common. Is that an issue, or do people have access to it, most places across the state if they need to?
We're working to identify where there are gaps, and we're looking into what we can do to help fill those gaps. The food banks are able to go to grocery stores to spend these funds. And so some of the food banks are operating independently of the Food Bank of Wyoming. 20 of those we have a agreement independently of the Food Bank of Wyoming, and 60 of them already have an agreement with the Food Bank of Wyoming. And the way this funding works is that 50% of the money is for them, that they receive is for them to spend through the Food Bank of Wyoming, which goes a little further because the food bank has agreements to kind of be a wholesale distributor or to receive food for free. And then the other 50% of the money they receive is so they can go to grocery stores to buy that food and have it immediately available.
Mm-hmm. You said you've been getting a lot of calls from, not just reporters, but also members of the public and people who use SNAP benefits. What have you been hearing from them? Is it just questions about how things are going to work until federal funding resumes?
Our DFS offices are fielding questions from the public, which is normal, but they are concerned about their SNAP recipients. Out in the field, we have an office in every county, and we do know the SNAP recipients sometimes personally out in those fields. And there are SNAP recipients who call and ask, can I ask these questions about my funding? And our staff members are worried. They want to see the best for people, and they are worried about what impact this could have in the community.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I have too much more. This is still early on, so I know there's not a lot of answers from DFS yet. As things are still being figured out. Is there anything else that you think we should talk about concerning this discussion of SNAP benefits in Wyoming?
Yes, I have a few more things.
Oh, perfect.
I would love to share with you.
Okay, great.
The first is that we want to make sure that someone who might be eligible for SNAP and wants to apply applies, because some of our applications have gone down, and we are able to process SNAP applications right now, and it takes a while. It's a lengthy process. It involves a written application, documentation, an interview, and so we want people who are thinking of applying and want to apply, we want them to continue to do that. Also for LEAP, we want them to continue to apply, because we can process those applications and we can be ready when funding is restored.
Mm-hmm. So that hasn't changed anything. People can still apply just fine. And, will they be able to get enrolled into this? I guess there's no enrollment for this current program, is there, where, anyone can go to food banks. You don't have to be SNAP members. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. But the applications are just for when funding resumes.
Right. Right. And we just have new information for you. On Tuesday, USD announced that SNAP recipients would receive partial benefits from their November funding. So what does that mean? A partial benefit is not a 50% allotment. It's not exactly that. It's every SNAP benefit is calculated for that household, and everyone kind of receives a different amount based on all kinds of factors. So we understand that there will be partial funding, and DFS is right now working really hard to do the technical back end of that funding so that the partial funding can go out. This involves working with our system, because it's a computer system that has the funding information for SNAP, and then working with the EBT card company to make that partial funding work. Once we have the technical part done, we will be manually entering everyone's funding. There's 13,000 households receiving SNAP, which is about 28,000 people. And we will be entering that. And once we start, it'll be a matter of days, not weeks, to get that funding out. So we will see partial funding for SNAP going out soon, as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. You said it's not 50%, but do you know yet what partial funding means, or is that still, TBD?
It's going to be different for every household.
Okay,
it's going to look different.
It's based on those same factors that determine how much funds each family receives. In SNAP, how it was funded previously, is it similar to those factors?
It's similar. It has to do with the allotment and the calculations that go into the SNAP benefits.
Mm-hmm. You said there's 13,000 families. Will all of them be receiving partial funds as part of this, or is that also depending on those factors?
This will be the November payments that were expected to go to these families. It will be the November funding will be partially given out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and does that impact the spending of the LISR funds from the governor in the coming weeks? Determining on how that rolls out. You said it's 1.4 million estimated per week. Is that expected to change at all because of this?
The hunger relief program will remain in place right now.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to share?
Two things.
Perfect.
What is SNAP? I had a few people ask me. SNAP used to be called food stamps. This is a program that's been in place for decades, and it's meant to help with food insecurity. And then the funding situation with these two federal programs with LEAP and SNAP, it's fluid, and we've been seeing quite a few changes, and we'll just keep updating as often as we can. Please do check our website. It's dfs.wyo.gov. Also, anyone who is in need can call 211. It's just the number's 211, and that's our Wyoming 211 resource, and they will help connect you with local resources that can help you.
Great. And another thing I meant to ask with the LEAP program is that, is that getting partial funding as well, or is that just for the SNAP funding?
The partial funding is just for the SNAP funding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Kelly, thank you for coming into the office and chatting with me about this. I appreciate it. And
thank you. Thank you for allowing us to have this chat.
On Thursday, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to pay full SNAP benefits for November by Friday. At the time of publication, a judge rejected the administration's current plan to only partially fund that food stamp program. Now, here's Taylor Staples, our arts and entertainment reporter, to bring you a roundup of some upcoming events in Cheyenne and Laramie County this week.
Today, there's a lantern walk at the Children's Village by the Botanic Gardens from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m., and the Cheyenne Little Theater Players production of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs of the Black Forest kicks off at 7 p.m. at Mary Godfrey Playhouse. The show will also be playing tomorrow at 7 p.m. and Sunday, November 9th at 2 p.m. On Saturday, November 8th, Girls on the Run Wyoming is hosting a 5K at Central High School with festivities starting at 7:45 a.m. And there's a Paddle on the Plains pickleball tournament from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Pickler. Also, there are 3 craft sales and vendor markets, all happening from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. One is happening at Fellowship Hall, one is at VFW 1881, and the other is at Frontier United Methodist Church. Then there's a Cats on Mats yoga event from 11 a.m. to noon at Cats and Coffee Connections, as well as the inaugural Cheyenne Veterans March at 11 a.m. in Lions Park, as well as a simple mold making workshop from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Cheyenne Creativity Center. For concerts, there's an Opera on Tap Wyoming show called A Night of Italian Opera at 6 p.m. at Mondello's, a Beatles vs. Stones tribute show at 7 p.m. at the Lincoln Cheyenne, and a Cheyenne Youth Symphony 25th Anniversary Concert at 8 p.m. at LCCC's Surbrook Prentice Auditorium. On Sunday, November 9th, there's Meowingo from 1 to 3 p.m. at Cats and Coffee Connections. And on Monday, November 10th, there's a Range Beef Cow Symposium from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Event Center at Archer, and a Cowgirls of the West luncheon at 11:30 a.m. at Little America. Then, Tuesday, November 11th, is Veterans Day. The city will celebrate with a free Honoring Our Veterans music concert at LCCC's Surbrook Prentice Auditorium from 7 to 8 p.m. On Wednesday, November 12th, there's a voter registration pop-up from 10:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Laramie County Senior Center, and an AARP community group meeting from 12:30 to 2 p.m., also at the Senior Center. Then there's a science fair prep workshop at the library from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. And finally, on Thursday, November 13th, there's another Thankful Thursdays fundraiser featuring the Hunting with Heroes Wyoming at the Lincoln Way Event Hall, with doors opening at 4 p.m., as well as a gouache basics workshop from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Cheyenne Creativity Center. Then there's another Wyoming State Archives Evening Speaker Series session from 7 to 8 p.m. at the Wyoming State Museum or via Zoom. And it's also Pay What You Can night for CLTP's Snow White at 7 p.m. at Mary Godfrey Playhouse.
And finally, before we close out today, here's a quick recap of some of our top stories and headlines from this past week. Dick Cheney, the Wyoming oilman and politician who was widely considered to be the most powerful vice president in American history, died on Monday. He was 84. The state committee voted Monday to sponsor a comprehensive package of 6 election reform bills focusing primarily on boosting manual ballot counting requirements, expanding poll watcher authority, and tightening voter identification requirements. The proposed reforms advanced despite warnings from county clerks that some changes could be logistically impossible to implement by the 2026 election cycle. Following 3 sets of interviews, Cheyenne City Council Ward 1 members Pete Laybourne and Jeff White have agreed to recommend Larry Wolf to fill the seat left vacant by Ward 1 Council member Scott Roybal, who died on September 24th. Wolf was announced Tuesday as the choice following a panel-style interview Monday evening with the 4 finalists. And finally, while the government shutdown delays SNAP benefits, leaving families unsure of how they might put food on the table, 3 Cheyenne restaurant owners are trying to find ways to help. That's all for this week's episode of Wyoming Watch. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check back next Friday for more.